continue our lessons from the Old Testament as we do every Monday. We are reading from the book of Ruth, chapter 1 and verse 26. And chapter 1 and verse 22. Ruth, chapter 1 and verse 22. So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favor." And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." Then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose young woman is this?" And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, "She is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers." So she came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Now listen, my daughter. Do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young woman. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping, and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn." Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" But Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left the father and mother at your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Then she said, "I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants." And at the mealtime Boaz said to her, "Come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in the wine." So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed to her roasted grain. And she ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. When she rose again to glean, Boaz instructed his young man, saying, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. And also pull out some from the bundles for her, and leave it for her to glean, and do not rebuke her." So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. And she took it up and went into the city. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She also brought out and gave her what food she had left over after being satisfied. And her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today? And where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, "The man's name with whom I worked today is Boaz." And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Naomi also said, "The man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers." And Ruth the Moabite said, Besides, he said to me, you shall keep close by my young men until they have finished all my harvest. Amen. Now, Ruth is a friend of Naomi. She's a Moabite. Truthfully, though, faithful to the Lord, but also respectful of her mother-in-law. She was before respectful to her husband, but she was also respectful to anything and anyone who had to do with God. Now, being chosen by God because of her faith, and we also going to see some other characteristics of her, because that was the woman that God selected to become and be the husband of Boaz, who had a child from Ruth who was Obed, who was then on going to give birth later on to down the lineage tree to David. Therefore, Ruth now is a woman who's a Moabite and had no chance, no opportunity, and no chance at all to be added to the lineage tree of David and then Christ. And in other words, to be blessed in that way by God Himself. However, the mistake of the family of Elimelech and Naomi, and I might say that it was against the word of the Lord and against the will of God, even though that he was a believer, as they were found in the land of Moab, and there Ruth got married to Elimelech's son. But now the situation had brought Ruth to a foreign land, but her future is going to be amazing. And now we have to look at the amazing work of the Lord. I even dare say that the mistake of Elimelech, the misfortune of Naomi, thinking that God has rejected her, was made so by God. And again, it's not written in the word, it's just my assumption. I could be wrong. But we see now that Ruth, through all of those mistakes, is brought to this very land so that she can be blessed, so that then on she can become a part of the lineage tree of Christ. I'm not sure if that was the way or what God intended from the beginning, but I know that nothing happens in random. Who knows what the plan of God is, and how can someone see into it and research and understand how God is working? But what is important is for us to see what the Lord found and selected Ruth, but then also Boaz. Two people that had no idea or relationship. They were aliens to one another, but they were bonded by God, and He gave them that blessing and opportunity to become the parents of later on be David, and that is an amazing honor. Let us therefore see more about Ruth. Now, Ruth, following Naomi, she found herself in Bethlehem. The first characteristic, therefore, of Ruth's is that now she has to take care of Naomi, because now Naomi is an old woman, but also her own self. That is why she needs to do one thing, and that thing is to humble herself, and she will go to glean. And that means that she will go to gather whatever has whatever the remaining was from the harvest. The first thing is that she will go, and the second thing is that she will ask Naomi. She won't do a thing without asking or speaking to Naomi about it. How important is it for the woman to not do anything without asking or seeking advice from her own mother? And how bad it is for the children to do as that child pleases, and how even more bad is it for us to do anything without asking the advice of Christ before we select, or before we disregard, before we move forward, or before we stop, before any actions we are going to have. We need to ask God, and we need to know that God is listening, and we are sure that God knows everything, and we are sure that by faith God is going to reply to us. He's going to bless us, because God is pleased to speak and bless and guide the person. That is why He's asking from us in the Old New Testament to be baptized by the Spirit, because we have a master and a teacher that is God and Christ. Therefore, Ruth now starts by and with the blessing of Naomi to go glean, to gather, so that they can both eat. And all at random, by luck, she finds herself in the fields of Boaz. Boaz being a man who God selected, who was the only relative of Naomi's, and he is the right person at the right time, because God has predestined everything. Isn't that beautiful? To trust ourselves and our paths and our lives to Christ. Isn't that beautiful? In other words, to not plan anything for your own self, to not think or imagine, and because when you walk not by faith but by sight, then you're going to fail. Instead, therefore, of you planning ahead, trying to find by your own self what is good and what is best for you, without doing all of that, instead go to Christ, because He has the best plans for you, for the small things but also for the big things. He has good wills for you. And even if you want this thing, God is going to give you something else. Something's going to be coming straight from heaven, and you won't be even able to understand where it came from. All by luck, she found herself in the part of the field belonging to Boaz. And now her character is revealed with great humility. She said to the reapers, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers." Now, imagine that in the midst of the Israelites, they had to allow her. But the fact that someone has to allow me to do something doesn't mean that I'm not going to ask, because I want anyone who's offering me anything to be done so by love. I don't want to do something because I'm obliged by the Lord. I don't want someone to do me a favor because the Lord is obliging him to do so. I want my brothers in my life to do what they want to do in joy, so that both of us can thank God instead. so that we can then both enjoy the blessings of God. And as he was gleaning, Boaz came along, a perfect husband. The first thing he said to them, to the reapers, he said, "The Lord be with you." That's in verse 4. He didn't see if they were working properly. He didn't inspect them. But instead, he went amongst people that were below than himself, in authority that is, not to rebuke, not to instruct, or not to fix things, but instead he went in by blessing the Lord. Entering your you by entering and asking and mentioning the blessings that the Lord has for you in your company. And I loved it when I first read it, because Boaz was from God, was a man in the presence of the Lord. He was generous, blessed. He's not a person who is always complaining. He's not rebuking. He's not micromanaging, let's say, but rather he's only blessing the Lord. Can you do it? What are you doing, my brother? I'm blessing the Lord, but not just with your mouth, not with just words, but with actions. Because you are his child, you were added to this church and you were blessed. Your name is written in the book of life, and you are trained to take part in the rapture of the church, and you are complaining. Why? You coming in the church with attitude. Why are you doing it? Instead, come in and scream out hallelujah, so that the Spirit can be blessed through your words. When you go into your house, do the same. Blessed be the Lord. You go to a gathering, do not seek around to see what they're doing, but instead go in and say, "The Lord bless you," instead. And I love this kind of character, and I want to be like that. And let us all become like Boaz, always blessing the Lord. But also look at his look at his workers. They're not afraid of him. When they are seeing him coming from afar, they're not saying, "Quick, you need to show yourself occupied," but instead they reply, uh, "The Lord bless you." The one says, "The Lord be with you," and they are answering, "The Lord bless you, boss." Let's say. Imagine in that environment, isn't God gonna be blessful? Imagine a different kind of boss going in and saying, why are you standing down? You didn't do it properly. Why are you allowing this person to glean with you? Rebuke her now. But let us be generous in the presence of the Lord. It's best for us to give than to take or receive. The worst man in the church, the one who has the love for money, who is the root of every bitterness. And when I see such a person, I'm going away, I'm drifting away, because that person is dangerous. Let us not keep everything to ourselves, but let our heart be open, let our spirit be gentle, and always bless the Lord. And no matter what happens to us, again, for us to bless the Lord. And imagine such a house, imagine such a church. When I come into the church, I always see happy faces and laughing, let's say, smiling faces. And the answer is that this is the case because we are living in the presence of the Lord. And Apostle Paul says, always be glad and joyful, and always exalt the Lord. And that is the person of the Lord who is blessed by the Lord. Instead of, if you are not joyful but you are complaining, then how is the Lord going to bless you? What is the Lord supposed to do with you? The Lord bless you, they replied in verse 4. And then he looks around and he saw Ruth. And Moabites were different in skin color than Israelites. And people, when they see difference in the skin color or the color of the, the the hair, they're thinking twice. But we don't think that way here in this church. There's no one better or worse. It's just more a blessed brother, and there's a blessed, even more blessed brother. And he asks the reaper, and he replies, he and the servant said that she is a young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. And she said to me, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers. And so she came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. Imagine now the working capacity and the working mentality of that woman. It's not just that she's faithful, it's not just that she's humble, but also she has a good work ethic. The bad characteristic is for you to be complaining, for you to be to not give away, and for you to not to not be willing to work. For you to say do not spend any money, keep it all for yourself, or always complaining and jealous. If you have those characteristics, you cannot have a good Christian life. May God free us from those things and make us generous, blessed and holy, so that we will and the only thing for us to do is to exalt God. Let me give you an example when a part of my life, the time in my life that I was a bit fallen, let's say. My problems were someone else's issues. The only one who had no problem was myself. Anything that was going bad in my life, it was because of others. And God showed me the situation when I understood, and I said that I am not worthy. And I went to the Lord and I repented. And I said, please, Lord, take away from me all those bad things that I have, and please perfect the character of Christ in me. And this is what I want to do. As Apostle Paul says, become my imitators as I am an imitator of Christ. There's nothing more beautiful than that. For us to be imitators of Paul, and because we are not able to imitate Christ, and we cannot do that because we cannot see Christ, but instead we are seeing the word of the Lord. That is why we are acting as the first apostolic church was acting. I don't really mind what you think or what I think. We should all mind what the first apostolic church was doing, away from the characteristics that we mentioned before. Only a Christian can have those characteristics. And when Boaz was informed, truthfully, by his servant about that woman that came from the country of Moab, and see the characteristics that we mentioned before were profound in this woman, because she was working without, except from a short rest, she was working from early morning, and Boaz's heart was opened up, and she found grace in front of the eyes of Boaz. And when Boaz went to Naomi, Ruth actually went to to work that morning by saying, I'm gonna work for anyone who I find grace to. And she found grace in front of the eyes of Boaz. And immediately Boaz said, now listen, in verse 8, my daughter, do not go glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women that are working for me. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping, and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you're thirsty, because you will be thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn. And he gave her absolute freedom to do exactly as he wishes and to do whatever she wanted to do. Only God can give you such power, but only the person of God can receive such blessing. Of course, everything has to be in respect to the word of the Lord, because the word of the Lord says, to him who asks, from you give, and from those who demand from you, in other words, those who are from the people who are requesting from what is yours, do not request back from them, because you want to be like God instead. Then see, in front of the grace she found, in front of Boaz, she did exactly what God wanted her to do. And the word of the Lord says in verse 10 that she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, and she said to him, why have I found favor in your eyes? Now, you can see the big secret, that the person who is working from grace to grace is the person who is acting according to the grace he received. And that's the joy of life. He's not just blessed, but he's also happy for him to find grace, for my wife to find grace in the eyes of my wife, and for me to find grace in the eyes of my wife. And then as I receive more grace in the eyes of my wife, I will provide her with more grace in my eyes. And imagine if every one of us, one from another, receives grace. And if you are complaining or bitter, go to the Lord and ask and apologize and say to him, please Lord, change my heart. Apostle Paul says that you should expand your heart. Corinthians, he said to the letter to the Corinthians, do not bound yourself and keep everything to yourself, but instead open up your heart, because all of us need to be brothers, and more than that, friends. That friends means Ruth, for me to trust you and for you to trust me. Not for me to hold back and you hold back when you see me, because we cannot be joyful if that is the case. Because if that is the case, I will watch out and I will listen carefully to what you have said, and even if you were to do something that I didn't like, instead of complaining, don't think about it, forget it. Because at the end of the day, we are all people. Because God gave me an example, because one day I went and said, you know what he has done to me? And the reply was that he who is without a sin, let him throw the rock first. And I said, I'm not without a sin. And then he said, are you gonna therefore throw the rock? And of course I replied, no, I'm not gonna, because I'm not worthy of doing that. And I said, that's the kind of spirit that God wants. Someone who's not complaining, someone who's not passing judgment on others, but instead he is a servant and a child that is working for his father. He's not angry. He's not throwing off. He's not angry. He's not holding back, but he's continuing to work no matter what the situation is, no matter how hard the situation is. And she fell on her face, bowing down to the ground, and said to him, Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? What a beautiful opinion and stance for one to have. And for you to say to the Lord that I'm not worthy and have many mistakes. I know my own mistakes, and you know your own mistakes, but yet we all find grace in front of the eyes of the Lord. And if I find grace in front of the eyes of the Lord, but your eyes as well, don't I have to exalt God and say that how beautiful are you, because you are ready to provide mercy on me, so that I may find grace in your eyes and in front of the eyes of people. Isn't therefore important, gravely important, for us to find grace in the eyes of the Lord and in front of the eyes of people? It's amazing for you to have and be given grace by God, but for you to receive it, you need to be humble more and more, but also in truthfulness and with love. May God help us so that we may receive grace. Do not say big words and speak a lot, because when you go on and say and speak much, then at the end of the day you say things that are wrong. But if you want to be strong, be quiet. Be quiet means be humble in your heart. Be quiet, be joyful, and smile. Exalt God and people for His people. And Boaz replied truthfully, and he is honest. And he said to Ruth, he said to her exactly what he saw in her eyes before. Because what you're doing and the works and the actions you have will follow you, even if they're bad or even if they're good. Because when I see you, I know what you are doing, or I know your whereabouts. I know that you're complaining. I know that you are jealous, or I know that you are idle. I know that you don't like spending or giving, or I know that you're liking to keep everything for yourself, and that is going before you. But if you have good characteristics, then you become the reason for someone's blessing. That is why Boaz answered, All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. And all of those words, more that come in verse 12 and 13, are told to a Moabite woman. And wise Boaz said all those things because he heard all the good things that she has done. And that is all in verse 11. But that is what the want of the Lord is, for you to go out of your relatives, of your native land. If you see that is not going good for you, if you see that things are not going the way that are not going easy for you, in the sense of God not being with you, exit your native land and I will guide you. Start moving and you're gonna see where God is gonna lead you. You're gonna go to the land of Hannah, and you're gonna see and find the land who is pouring milk and honey. And after that, now Boaz comes along with a heart full of love and honor. That is why I say, for two people to be married, the first thing that needs to be done is love, and then there is respect as a brother. If you don't respect and admire one another, then do not marry him, because you're going to be in trouble. If your relatives are not admiring the woman that you're taking, then think about it twice, because there has to be admiring. And if there is, then the Lord is gonna work in your heart the love of God who's gonna be poured out through the Spirit in your heart, because you're not choosing according to the flesh or according to the looks, but we are selecting according to the will of the Lord. And not just the marriage issue, let's say, but all issues in your life, no matter what, whether that is work or not. We are admiring, we are choosing what is good, and we are disregarding what is not good, and then the love of God is coming in our hearts. The Lord continues on in verse 12, boys, now, and says, "The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord." Apostle Paul says that God is not unjust to forget your work, and God is not unjust to forget these the actions of your love as you continue on to serve your brothers. And God is not unjust. If you come along and you're waiting for people to serve you, call you, speak to you nicely, they're going to be blessed, but you are not. People who are doing those things, God is going to bless them surely. But what's the profit for you if other people around you are blessed but you are not? Instead of you being blessed, just you, why won't I serve you as well and be blessed too? And Peter said to the Lord, "I'm not gonna allow you to wash my feet, never." And Christ told him that this is not how it's done, because if you are not allowing me, if you won't allow me, then you have you cannot be a part of me. That is why you need to allow others to serve you, and you need to serve others. Now Boaz says, "The Lord will repay you." Is there any work that Ruth is to be repaid for? And the answer is yes, because she has done many things, including her love for her mother-in-law. And a full reward be given you by the Lord. Why? Because no matter what the decision is, when it comes to you serving, you took it, and you took the decision because you took it under the in the name of God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Because everything I do is not for me to have a good time, but for the Lord to be pleased in me. And because I'm not able to love all people, then I'm asking the Lord to give me the love that He wants me to have. I first go near the Lord, and then I do what the Lord is commanding me to do by the help and with the power of the Lord. And she humbled herself even more. Then she said, we read in verse 13, "I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants." What beautiful words. Thanking someone because you comforted me, even though I don't deserve it. And the truth is that you are unworthy, and I am unworthy. And if you say, "But you're not understanding what I'm doing, and I'm doing many things," and you are boasting on the things you're doing, then the Lord is going to erase your work and is going to abandon you. But if you say, "No matter what I do is not by my own strength and power, but is by the Lord's power given to me," then the Lord is going to bless you even more. Never say, "I'm doing this or that," or boast on the things you're doing. Allow other people to bless you instead. Do not take care of showing yourself up and your actions. Do not try to compare yourself with others, because you become fool. You become a fool, and you lose the presence and the blessings of the Lord. but the person who is doing many things but he's not speaking, then that person only is blessed by the Lord. And after these humble words that Ruth replied with, the more that Ruth is humbling herself, the more grace is going to find in front of Boaz. And the more grace Boaz is providing to Ruth, the more grace and humbling Ruth is going to reply back with. And Boaz said to her, told to his servants, let her glean even amongst the sieves, and do not reproach her. And also pull out some from the bundles for her, and leave it for her to glean, and do not rebuke her. That is what grace really means. Do not rebuke her. Allow her, give her, give her away. Do not rebuke her, and allow her to do as he pleases. And that's the person who's blessed by the Lord and is finding grace in the eyes of the Lord. Let me repeat. I am very happy for Boaz. But after reading those verses, I love Ruth even more. I was always proud of Boaz, but now I'm more proud for Ruth. As she was humbling herself, she wasn't complaining, she wasn't idle, she wasn't doing anything. The only thing she was doing is humble her own self. And the Lord was providing more and more grace. So she gleaned the field until evening, from morning until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. And she took it up and went into the city. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She also brought out and gave her what food she had left over after being satisfied. And she gave everything to her mother-in-law, because she had enough to eat in the house of Boaz. And her mother-in-law was happy. Is it possible for you to not be pleased with such a wife-in-law? And she asked her, where did you glean today? And where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you. She didn't know who that person was. Ruth didn't know that person, nor Naomi knew who that person was. And Ruth revealed then and said, the man's name with whom I work today is Boaz, and I found grace in his eyes. And Naomi was very pleased and amazed. And her mind started to working. Boaz is one of our relatives. And after exalting God for the things that happened in Ruth's life, and after she blessed and exalted the name of the Lord, see, by saying that may he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead, because he thought to himself, is it possible for Boaz to marry Ruth and for me to have grandchildren and for my family to be continued on, and instead of death for me to receive more blessings? And she said that the man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers. And Ruth the Moabite said, besides, he said to me, you shall keep close by my young men until they have finished all my harvest. Now Naomi is replying, it is good, my daughter, that you go out with these young men, lest in other field you be assaulted. You are not there by luck. God brought your steps to this field because he found you faithful, because he was pleased in you, because He has good wills and paths and plans for you, and great blessings until the end. Amen.